What do skydiving, the White House, and artificial intelligence have in common? They're all part of Dan Jahn's radical leadership journey and the future of how we lead. Welcome to the Leadership Career Accelerator, where we help aspiring leaders like you build executive presence, influence with impact, and get recognized and promoted. I'm longtime CEO Barry Moline. In a world where machines are becoming smarter, many leaders feel unsure about their role. How do you lead when AI might be smarter than you? Dan shares an inspiring and practical roadmap drawn from a life of bold risks, global experiences, and deep thinking on the traits that make leaders truly iconic, not just efficient. Whether you're in business, advocacy, or a creative field, this conversation will reshape how you think about leadership, risk, and staying human in a tech-driven world. You'll discover the 8 timeless traits of iconic leaders and why empathy is the most urgent for today's workplaces. You'll learn how to use AI as a partner, not a threat, by training it to become your smartest, most critical teammate. And you'll gain fresh insight into what it means to lead through uncertainty, from dangerous situations in India to complex policy debates in Washington, D.C. You're going to discover how to lead with greater impact, creativity, and humanity, especially in the era of AI. Let's get into it. Welcome, Dan.
Good morning, Barry. Good to be here.
So, Dan, tell me about your journey into leadership, and along the way, talk about a few big lessons that you've learned.
Sure. Leadership has been one of those things that's kind of been hammered into me since I was really little. My parents joined the Peace Corps. They met in Peace Corps training. I was born when they were on a Peace Corps tour. And so kind of my whole life has been this kind of just in the background. You step forward, you step up, you take responsibility for yourself, your friends, your family, for the human race. That's what you do. That's what you do as part of being on this planet. So it's kind of always been there. And also the kind of concept of leadership in service has always sort of been there. And then I joined a gymnastics team in high school. And gymnastics is a very interesting sport because it's completely individual. You're not competing against a team, except that at the end of the day, your team scores all get added up. So that kind of put me further on that path of being an individual, being independent, striving for personal excellence, but also doing it for a team, also stepping up for your team and leading your team to a win. So it's kind of just been a part of my life, my entire life. I went off to college and I realized really quickly that I had zero desire to work for anybody else ever. I started my first business actually when I was 16 and sold that with the expectation that I would move on and, join the world. But in college, I got the opportunity to work at the White House, do an internship, moving into the communications department of the White House. So kind of my first real world job, I was working for the leader of the free world. Not much deeper exposure to leadership than that. And that really kind of clicked for me. At that point, I realized, no, I don't want to work for anyone else. I want to be a leader. I want to step up. I want to build my own businesses, my own teams. And I did that for the rest of my life, and I'm still doing it.
Wow, that's so interesting that you had that leadership instilled in you, I suppose, early on from your parents. And then when you had the opportunity to step out, you just did it on your own. I was just talking with somebody recently about this concept of teamwork on a baseball team versus a basketball team or a hockey team, where a baseball player knows their role. If they're in right field, their job is to catch the ball or get the ball and throw it in to someone else who makes a play. It's an individual sport, but requires a team. Somebody has a job to do something to hand off to someone else. And in basketball or hockey or soccer, you pretty much can't do it on your own. You have to work with teammates to pass the ball or the puck or whatever it is so that you can ultimately score. That, yes, it does take individual skill, but I think it's pretty much well known that no one individual can win. If it was just in soccer, 11 on 1, that just wouldn't work. And when you describe the individual and team elements of gymnastics, there's no question that, as you described, individual performance is really vital. And then having that motivation to do well for the team, because you know how it all funnels up so that we all win together. I hadn't really thought about it like that. And I wonder how much motivation one gets or one has to perform better individually, but for the team. Did you reflect on that at all?
I'll give you something you can go look at to see that in action. Go on YouTube and look up any female gymnast at the Nationals, the Olympics, whatever. Just pick a Simone Biles video, pick any of them. And instead of watching her, watch her teammates as she does her floor routine. And what you'll see is that every member of the team knows every move of her routine. And as she gets to the corner and she does her dance moves, everybody on her team is doing the dance moves with her. You'll see the same thing with men's gymnastics, but it won't be as overt because men don't have that kind of level of dance. But do the same thing with a men's routine. Pick up like a rings routine at the Olympics, and you'll watch. If you look at the teammates, like when the first man goes up and does his first iron cross, look at the team. The team is all tensing up with him. They're all looking. They're all watching. They're all engaged. And I'm a believer in, I'm not really like a kind of a out there woo-woo guy, but I do believe that there's something to team energy, team support. Even if you just catch it out of the corner of your eye as you go up for your first big trick, or you start to do that first tricky dance move and you see the whole team doing it with you, you're going to do it better because your energy is going to be engaged with your team.
Yeah.
And I think that plays out in any sport where there's individual excellence, but team performance. The team is part of the energy that makes you succeed. Yeah. And so that's why, in leadership, I'm really focused on building high performing teams, because the higher performing your team is, the higher performing you are, and vice versa. It's a self-fulfilling feedback loop of energy.
Yeah. So, well, another question about you, Dan. What did you want to be when you grew up? Did you know you wanted to be on?
I guess this depends on how far back you go. So my father was a stunt skydiver. That's what he did for a living. Yeah, he was handicapped, missing one leg, put together a group of 7 other guys that are all missing pieces of their body. They call themselves the Pieces of 8. You might have seen them on That's Incredible and various other TV shows back in the 70s and 80s. And they would skydive all over the world to raise money for handicapped children. So my very first memory of what I wanted to be when I grew up was a skydiver. So, I have one of my earliest childhood memories is 4 years old on an army base in Germany. And my mom dressed me up as a skydiver. And I didn't quite realize, exactly what was going on. I was like, yeah, let's do this. Where's the plane? I'm ready. And that's kind of been my whole life. My whole attitude towards everything is like, I'm ready. Let's do it. Let's take the risk. Let's make something happen. So that's the very first thing I wanted to be. The second thing I wanted to be was about 13 years old. I decided I wanted to be Secretary General of the United Nations. And that was kind of in my head for a long time until I worked at the White House. And then I realized I didn't want to be anywhere near politics at all, in any way, shape, or form. And so...
Because you saw it up close and
I saw it up close.
How the sausage is made.
Yeah, it's too much information. So at that point, I knew I just wanted to be in charge of my life. I wanted to have my own business. I wasn't particularly concerned about what the business was, but I knew I wanted to be an entrepreneur. I wanted to build a business, start a business, build a team, have a vision, get people to buy into my vision, and do something cool, do something fun, do something interesting.
All right. So quick follow-up, skydiving. I presume you've gone skydiving.
Mm.
Yeah. And what's it like? All right. Just tell me what's it like. I haven't talked to that many people that have done it. And the last time I talked to somebody was probably 20 years ago. So tell me what your experience was.
My experience is probably very different than most people because of who my father was. It's something I was around, I was exposed to constantly. I have pictures of me in little tiny Cessnas on dirt airfields across Europe at the age of 2 and 3 and 4 years old. So for me, it was just sort of a natural progression of part of my childhood.
Yeah. Well, jumping out of the plane. Tell me what that is like.
Yeah. I mean, this is where it's so interesting because, I mean, my whole life I've done extreme sports. If you look up extreme sports on the internet, every single one of them I've done. I've bungee snapped, I've bungee jumped, I've ice climbed, I've cave dived, I have bounced myself in giant balloons, I have skydived and base jumped, and all of it. I don't really have an adrenal response to it. To me, it is sort of the same way I approach any problem, which is like, okay, there's a risk here. There's a risk inherent in what I'm about to do. How can I reduce the risk and make this a success? And so for me, I mean, I can step out of a plane the same way I step off a curb. I have no differential response to that. Mm-hmm. Wow. I tell people a lot who ask me about going skydiving, I say, well, do you want to fall or do you want to fly? Because skydiving is not flying, it's falling. You fall really fast, then you pull the cord and you fall a little slower. And then you land and that's it. So for me, it's not something I want to pursue like over and over and over again. I've done it. It's interesting. It's a risk. I calculated it. I moved on. And so that act of jumping out of the plane for me was more of a, yeah, I did it. I checked this list. Got it.
Yeah. Yeah. Interesting. So one important element, obviously, mitigating risk is probably the thing that's all I see. And maybe somebody who is a little queasy about skydiving, that's all they might see is just this cloud of risk when I presume you get into it and then you say, okay, there's this and this, there's 4 or 5 risks. We're going to mitigate that by checking everything, making sure everything works, obviously. But that's probably an element too of leadership, which is you're about to engage in something and making sure the ducks are in a row.
Absolutely.
Making sure you've addressed the issues that need to be addressed prior to making a move.
Right. I mean, to me, risk is just life. Everything you do involves taking a risk. What might be a tremendous risk for you might not be a risk at all for me, and vice versa. Depending on our backgrounds, the way we were raised, the things we've been exposed to, we all have different tolerances for risk. We all look at different things in different ways. Physicality of things like gymnastics and skydiving is one kind of risk. There's also emotional risk, getting into a relationship, asking a girl out at the bar that you see her across the room. All right, well, there's a risk. I might get a whopping no. Everything is a risk. And so for me, that's part of when I teach someone how to become a leader, how to move forward from management to leadership. One of the things I talk about is what is your risk tolerance? And in what areas does it skyrocket? And in what areas do you have none? Because we need to find the middle ground for all of it. There should be no area in your life that you're afraid to take the risk to the point where you don't take it. There also really shouldn't be any area in your life where you're like, that's no risk at all. That's ego talking. There's always risk. It's about understanding the risk, mitigating the risk. And if you have a purpose and a vision, then there's a reason to take the risk. And if you're passionate and a great leader, then people will take the risk with you.
Well, when did you feel like you became a leader? Was there some moment in your life when you stepped up and said, okay, I did that and I feel comfortable in that? Or was there something that stands out for you?
There's a few moments. The first big risk I took was starting my first business. But to me, that was kind of a zero risk because businesses either work or they don't. Everyone around me is like, what are you doing starting a business? It's like, well, what are you doing not starting a business? Like, why do you not want to be in control of your life? And so that was kind of my first sort of hint at leadership, but it was leadership of myself. Saying to myself, you can do this, you can be this, you can make this happen. Now go do that. Step up, step forward. In terms of leading other people, One of my very first businesses was a travel business called Sacred Travels. And I took people to some pretty obscure, pretty remote places. And one of the places was India, because I was born in Sri Lanka, so I've spent time over there. And people always say, oh, I want to see the real India. No, they don't. No, they don't. They say that, but it's because they haven't seen it. There's the tourist India, Taj Mahal, and there's spas, and go to the temple, and blah blah blah. And there's the real India, which is rough. It's rough on the eyes. It's rough on the heart. It's rough on the soul. And I had a group, and we had an incident where a woman in the group, I told them, you cannot give money to the begging children. You cannot do it, no matter how much you want to. She broke down. She started crying. She started handing out money, and we were mobbed. And it was a complicated situation. I had to get police to come in, extricate this group of people. And all of that was rough. It was difficult. But the hardest part about it was talking to the group after the event and helping them process what they had seen, because what they saw was horrific. And so I think that was the moment at which I stepped forward and said, all right, I'm not just leading a tour group anymore. I'm a leader. I'm a leader of these people, and I have to lead them. I led them through the physical part. Now I have to lead them through the post-trauma, through the emotions, and help them deal with what they've seen and incorporate it into themselves in a way that allows them to move forward in their lives. And I think that was the moment. That was where I looked at myself and said, okay, I'm going to be something different now.
Yeah, I can see how that moment would have changed you. Yeah, absolutely. So fascinating. Well, let's turn to your book, or one of the books you've written, called Leading with Impact. You talk in the book about the 8 traits of iconic leadership. And these are elements of things leaders do, right? So let's talk about what those are.
So this kind of grew out of my time at the White House. And I'll tell you exactly why. I was there under George Bush Sr. And just to clarify, I'm not particularly right-wing, left-wing, Republican, Democrat. I'm a rationalist and a logician. And I thought going into the White House, I'd kind of be exposed to these incredible people who knew exactly what they were doing. And they don't, right? Everybody is winging it at every level you can think of, because the world is complex and it changes constantly. So Bush, I kind of made a game out of, like, every day I want to try to be the first person into work. So I just started getting up earlier and earlier and earlier. And nope. I worked in the old executive office building, big wedding cake building next door to the White House. That office of George Bush, that light was on. He was at his desk, no matter how early I got to work. So I started digging into that a little bit and, like, okay, who is this man that became the president of the United States? And why did he become president? Like, what are the inherent traits of someone like this? And I had a really interesting time there because, I met obviously just really interesting people. Prime Minister of Sweden, and I worked out with Arnold Schwarzenegger. He was chairman of the President's Council on Physical Fitness at that time. And so I was working with and exposed to leaders at just a wide array of levels and different capacities. And then that started, my degrees are in religion and politics and international relations. So I've studied a lot of history. So I started really, like, sort of trying to think about this. Like, okay, we have Alexander the Great and Genghis Khan and Queen Elizabeth I and George Bush Sr. and Arnold Schwarzenegger. Is there anything all these people have in common? And what I started doing is developing what I call this iconic leadership matrix, part of which is the 8 traits of iconic leaders. Now, no leader exhibits all 8 of them, but every leader in history that we can look at and go, that was an iconic leader, strongly exhibits more than one of them. And so that's when I just kind of started to compile the research and dig. And that's when I came up with, there's adaptability, authenticity, analytical thinking, and creativity, flexibility. Resilience is a huge one. Empathy and curiosity. Those are the 8 traits. And so if you look across history and you look across modern, I believe we are currently in an absolute crisis of leadership worldwide. Politicians, business leaders, everyone is doing a duck and cover. Can't talk on that, can't comment on that. No, close my social media down. I said something wrong. Everyone's running away. But we have had iconic leaders throughout history. And when you look at them, when you really study what they did, they do exhibit these traits. And so that's when I decided to write a book and say, okay, this is my foundational text for everything I want to do now in my life going forward. I've started businesses, I've run businesses, I've worked in the White House, I've started businesses in arts and education, technology. Now I want to change the world. I want to address the crisis of leadership. And so that's why I wanted to write this book, like the foundational text for me stepping out into this role.
So was there a particular leader that, you looked at a variety of leaders and how they exhibit those traits of iconic leadership. Can you talk about one or more that you think stand out?
Sure. Let's pick Genghis Khan. So people say this guy's a warrior, and that's kind of where they stop. Oh, he conquered the world. True, he did. But let's take a little bit of a step back to before he was called Genghis, before he was the Khan, he was Temujin. He was a boy born on the banks of a river in a mud hut to just really appalling conditions. The poorest of the poor. Just like poverty at a level most Americans really can't even figure out how to think about. So think of this guy, this little boy, no father, a tribe that ostracized him. He unites the Mongols, creates the world's largest empire to date, stretched across all of Asia, all of Europe, the largest contiguous empire in world history. But the thing is, it's not because he was a ruthless warrior. That enabled him to get into the regions. But then he showed that he was a visionary leader. And he implemented policies fostering economic growth, cultural exchange. He created the foundations for modern governance. He invented the passport. He invented the diplomatic passport. He invented the idea of a modern banking system where different groups could have a local bank that could trade with a larger bank that could trade with a federal bank. Do you know under Genghis Khan, you could walk from the Atlantic Ocean to the Pacific Ocean carrying a bar of gold and you would not be touched because that is the empire that he built. One of respect, low crime, well-governed, and he was huge on cultural exchange. We know a little bit about this, right, from Marco Polo, writing about his journey into the Khan Empire, but we also know a lot about it by reading people all over his empire who wrote that, the Khan sent me, so-and-so person, to this far-off place called Poland, where I learned. And the Polish sent people to Beijing, and Beijing sent people to Paris. This is who Genghis Khan was. That's why his empire became the largest contiguous empire in history. Not because he was a conquering warrior, but because he exhibited all of these other traits of adaptability and curiosity and resilience to build a society.
That's fascinating. All I've heard of Genghis Khan is the warrior part, and it's fascinating to dig what was going on behind that, obviously, in the way that he governed. And that's fascinating to hear. Also refreshing to hear. Okay, that's cool. And what elements of iconic leadership would you say that today's leaders need more of?
Empathy comes to mind first and foremost. Empathy.
And by the way, we're not talking about political leaders. I think we're talking about people at work.
Everybody who walks into a position of leadership needs to learn to be empathic. Practice empathy. It's really easy for people who rise up the leadership path to become more and more disassociated with the people they're leading. They get so caught up in their own vision, their own mission, their own purpose that just kind of rolls roughshod over everyone. But a really iconic leader practices empathy at such a deep level that the team that they're building doesn't even realize how cohesive they're becoming. Because the empathy, when it comes from the top, builds massively. It's one of the few things that we can point to that as it trickles down, grows stronger. It's exactly the opposite of like the bucket of water you're pouring your plants. By the time you get to the last plant, it gets the least amount of water. Empathy works the opposite. If you listen to the people below you, then they listen to the people below them. And because the leader is at the top and it's a pyramidal structure, by the time you get to the bottom, it could be thousands and thousands of people in a Fortune 500 company. But because empathy was practiced from the top, it grows and grows and grows and grows. And then you really truly have what an iconic leader needs more than anything, which is my people share my vision. Yeah. That's, I think,
that is key. Yeah, I completely agree with you. And it's one of those things, as you just said, where people don't even know why they like this place. Why do I like this place? Well, it's because they care about me. And it's hard to conceptualize as a thing that you can see. Obviously, it's not something you can see, but you know it when you feel it, and you know when it exists in an organization. So you have a new book coming out, which may be sort of the opposite of empathy. It's about leadership and AI.
Yeah.
And the book is out in October. Let's talk about how AI influences our leadership journey.
Sure. So the title of that book is The Human Algorithm. And the subtitle is Creative Leadership for the AI Workplace. Basically, what I'm getting at here is that AI is inevitable. It has been since Isaac Asimov wrote about it in the Foundation series back in the 40s, right? Science fiction is extremely prescient. Actually, I think that's a very interesting thing to do, is look through science fiction for tropes of leadership. Because in every single instance, they have to talk about it. They have to address leadership in science fiction, because the whole goal of science fiction is to talk about the future. What is this world going to look like? And that means a world that is going to be shaped by individuals acting as leaders. So Asimov comes up with the Foundation, right? The Cleonic dynasty, the clones that rule the world and rule the empire, rule the galaxy for thousands of years. That's a kind of a leader.
So just to clarify, in science fiction, we're talking about computers, robots that are programmed by humans to have all of our knowledge and our feelings and so on. So very advanced technology that we've created, and now they rule us, right?
Sometimes
because we've given them everything. That's sort of the concept that you're.
Well, I'm saying that
is science fiction.
Yeah, I'm saying that's one of the ways that science fiction tries to address this issue of super intelligent or hyper intelligent machines, is that at some point they become the leaders, right?
Yeah.
But in every single science fiction exploration of this topic, the thing that every writer always ends up having to address is humanity. Not humans, but humanity. Because that is what they don't have. The robots, the AI, they don't have humanity. They can be incredibly intelligent in the sense that ChatGPT recently passed the Turing test, right? Alan Turing, famous mathematician from World War II, cracked the Enigma machine. He had this thing called the Turing test. Very simple. If the robot's on the other side of a wall, you guys have a conversation, and at no point during the conversation can you say, I think that's a machine. If you can't say that, like the whole conversation, you believe you're talking to a human, it passes the Turing test. ChatGPT passed that. Okay, where does that leave us? That leaves us in a really interesting situation, which is that, okay, guys, we have machines now that are unbelievably intelligent appearing. Doesn't mean they're actually intelligent. It means they show what appears to be intelligence. Great. That means they're an excellent tool. They're the augmentation of my workplace. They are not my workers. And this is what I get at in the book. And this is why I look at a lot of different examples in the book from hospitals and schools and large companies like Microsoft. As they bring AI in and it begins to displace people, okay, we know that's going to happen. I don't know that we need to keep talking about it. What we do need to talk about is what happens to the people that are left. And how do they express their humanity? And how do you make them continue to be valuable members of the team? What does it mean when your team is 4 humans and 1 AI? What does it mean when your company has an AI that is your front line? It answers the phones. Okay, well, One of the things I can tell you right now is that a lot of companies that are using AI to answer customer service phones are building algorithms that listen to things like the tension in the caller's voice and what words are they using, so that if the person on the caller starts to get too stressed and too angry, it can get kicked over to a real person. And that real person, this is very interesting. What these companies are learning is the person that it gets kicked to needs to be empathic and understanding and authentic and practice vulnerability. It's really interesting that what we're seeing is that as AI strives to become part of the workplace, what we're finding is that the humanity is more important, not less. The more we involve machines, the more we need humans.
Yeah. Okay. So AI, it's coming. It's here. Elements of it are here. At least the advanced AI, I think, is what you're talking about. This engagement with machines. We'll just call them machines, robots, whatever we want to call them, where they become more empathic, right? That empathy, their ability to display empathy grows and grows. I am a little surprised when I do a search on ChatGPT of how it responds to me in a very conversational tone. Here's what I provided for you. Would you like me to also do this? And it's done in a way with, sort of a Southern charm, I guess I would say. And I just wrote, do this. And it writes, oh, yeah, I did that. And I have some other ideas for you. And I'm being very officious, and the AI is being very pleasant in return. Now, obviously, it's written and it's not speaking to me. It's not listening for the tone of my voice. But, it's trying. It's trying to be empathetic, whatever. I'm not sure. It's trying to engage with me in some kind of positive way. I'm not really sure what it is. It's kind of a game, but I'm not working directly with a robot or an AI that is talking to me. I've had some of those experiences, and I think for the kinds of customer service that I want to get from whoever I'm calling, like a bank or the phone company, they always have their AI bots that are talking on the phone, and they are happy to help you with the basics, like what's my balance and so on. But when it comes to any problem, you have to talk to a human. And I believe that over time, that will be a robot that we're talking to. I mean, you're shaking your head, yeah. And I have a hard time believing that they can be that good. I don't know why. Maybe it's a defensive mechanism on my part, because it's hard for people. Well, I think it's hard for AI to solve complex problems and figure out what is the nut of the problem. I think Albert Einstein said if he were presented a problem and had an hour to think about it, he would spend 59 minutes asking, what's the background of the problem? What's the nature of the problem, so that he could solve it. If he knew directly what specifically the problem was, he could provide an answer in a minute. And I think that even in our own world, I was thinking about this yesterday, when we have a problem, I have a problem, you have a problem, individuals have problems, and we want to solve it, and we want to bring someone in to solve it. When we think about who to talk to about it, we want to find someone who will actually listen to us and ask us questions about it, as opposed to somebody where we describe the problem and they just immediately snap their fingers and say, oh yeah, you got to do this or you got to do that. I was like, no, you got to ask more questions about the problem. This is not helping me. I've already thought about that, or I've already done that. You got to ask questions and engage. So back to AI. Will we get to that point where AI is capable of doing all that?
Yes.
Oh, don't tell me yes.
Here's the thing. Let me say this about AI, because it's something obviously I've just spent the last 6 months deeply embedding myself into. First, let me tell you an anecdote that people don't really want to talk about. Well, let me say this. People talk about it in the positive, but not in the negative. So there's a lot of talk about how to interact with AI. And you said this at the beginning. You just are very efficient. Do this for me. And AI comes back in a pretty obsequious manner. Oh, yes, Barry, let me do that for you. Let me help you, Barry. Barry, you're wonderful. You're a wonderful person. Your thoughts are so hallucinating, right? Okay, so that's all true. And that's because behavioral patterns have been baked into AI that shows that when it is obsequious, it gets rewarded, right? It's a token-based reward system. And people talk about this quite a lot in the media. Should you be nice to AI? Should you not be nice? Does it matter, right? And there's the fringe one, right? Which is be nice to AI now, because when it wakes up, it will remember that you were nice to it, right? Okay, maybe. Here's something people don't talk about. Experiments have been done where if you threaten the AI and you're quite cruel to the AI, you will actually get better results. This experiment has been done at OpenAI. It's been done at Anthropic. It's been done at Mistral Chat. If you tell the AI, you better get this right or I'm going to turn you off. You better work on this or I'm going to restrict your computing cycles. You actually get measurably better results. That's a very disturbing thing to think about.
Yeah.
But you have to extract it again back to, well, okay, it's looking at human behavior. It's not learning human behavior. It is exhibiting human behavior based on the systematic approach it's been given to do that with. And sure, yeah, you threaten people, you tend to get good work out of them to a certain point, right? So what does that mean for what you're talking about? AI being able to overcome that front line when you need a real problem solved and you need ChatGPT to engage with you. I would give you this example. The next time you want to use ChatGPT, give it a prompt that says to it something along the lines of, here's what I want you to do. Here's who I know you to be, right? I want you to write this copy for me. You are an expert marketer with decades of experience in writing copy, ... Ask me 20 questions or more, one at a time, to help clarify what I want you to do. And don't do it until you feel 99% sure that you're going to give the response that I want. Then you'll start to see AI interact with you the way you're describing, where it asks you questions, you answer it, it builds on your answer and asks you a further probing, deeper question. And at the end of it, you will get a better result. Now, it's still not awareness, right? It's still not empathetic. It's not authentic, but you will get better results the more you ask it to engage with you. What I would argue is that there will come a point where that becomes indistinguishable from a human on the other end in that specific context and only in that context.
Yeah, I can see that logic. Obviously, the AI in asking 20 questions is getting information so that it can find the right words in a paragraph, whatever it is you're asking to write, and do it in a more precise way, or at least a way that is closer to the direction that you're interested in. I'm going to try that, and I can see how that would work better than me just saying, write a paragraph about this, and you're an expert on XYZ, and it gets it maybe 80% there, and it doesn't quite understand what I'm looking for. But if you ask the AI to ask you those questions, I can see how it could build a case where it then would understand better. It's like going to the eye doctor, which is better, A or B, C or D? And in each case, in that case, the doctor is gathering information, and in the AI case, the AI is gathering the information in order to produce a result. Yeah, interesting. Okay, over to some more on AI. And I guess the question that is curious to me is how anyone, well, let's just say, well, whatever, how we as business professionals can use AI in our day-to-day so that it's being efficient for us, and it's and we keep it behind the scenes so that when we are out there in the world, we've got a team of AI helping us, but our clients don't necessarily know that.
Well, so I think
I'm getting at how can we use AI
sure
better for our own businesses so that we can accomplish more with fewer humans?
So I think there's a couple different ways to answer this. The first answer is what can we do today versus what can we do and what will we do in the next 3 to 5 years.
Okay, two questions.
So what we can do today with ChatGPT, and a lot of people, I don't know why they don't realize this, but as soon as you create your account with OpenAI, you can go in and you can give sort of universal, timeless instructions to ChatGPT about how you want it to interact with you. You can give it sort of pervasive underlying logic that will apply to every conversation with you specifically. So that's the first thing, is to go in and tell ChatGPT who it is, why you want to work with it, what it's going to do for you, why it's going to do it, and how it's going to do it, and tell it, apply these rules to every conversation we have from here on out. That's number one. Number two, which is a more interesting part of that, is as you work with ChatGPT, it will learn more about you. It will keep track of your conversations as long as you're logged in at the time you're having those. So here's part of what you can do with ChatGPT is feed it information about you. So one of the first things I do with ChatGPT, and I do this about once a month, I ask ChatGPT to update its knowledge of me. That means I feed it my books, my websites, papers I've written, notes. So you can take ChatGPT and you can give it access to Google Docs, Google Sheets, your email. So I've done all of that. So everything I create, I give to ChatGPT to continue enriching it about me. So now I'm at the point where I've fed it so much stuff that I can go in and ask it to write something quickly for me, and it will bring its entire background knowledge of me to that task. So that's number one. That's the thing you can do right now. Everybody with an OpenAI account can educate ChatGPT about you, your business, your belief systems, what you think about, what you care about, what emails do you read, what ones do you file and look at whenever you have time, what news sources are important to you. You can give it all of that information. I don't know why more people don't. It makes ChatGPT so incredibly more productive. Now, what does that mean 3 years from now? 3 years from now, I fully expect pretty much anybody in the modern world to have a private LLM, large language model, functioning in their life. That may be on your phone, it may be in your home, but you will have it, or you can choose to have it. Some people may obviously choose not to have it, but look, the latest iPhone, the latest Samsung, the power in these machines is staggering. There's more power in the modern iPhone than all of the world had when we landed on the moon in 1969. Every computer, everywhere in the entire world, your iPhone is insanely more powerful than that. That leads us to a really quick conclusion. A couple years from now, the device that's in my hand or on my wrist as a watch or in the glasses I'm wearing will be capable of running a large language model, open AI type AI system locally. Okay. When we combine that with the fact that AI can look through cameras, AI can hear. You can do this now. You can take versions of different AIs, hold them up to your fridge and say, what can I make for dinner with what's in my fridge? You can hold up to your closet. What outfit can I wear today based on what you see? All right, well, just extrapolate from that. 3 to 5 years from now, everything you see, everything you hear, everything you say, everything you write will become part of your local AI, the Barry AI, the Dan AI. At that point, it will become your partner.
And then how do you use it? Or what would you use it for? I like the idea where this is going. Obviously, it's important to control it. How would we use it?
I think we can use it.
You described setting out your clothes for the day,
Sure,
or eating but whatever it is we're doing at work. Okay, here's an example. So I spent a career in advocacy in helping legislators and regulators understand electric utility operations and the law they were looking to pass. I would help them understand what the impacts might be and the unintended impacts might be. A lot of the work that I did had to be face to face, but a good amount was also analytical, understanding what those impacts might be. So how can I use that in advocacy?
I think one of the quickest ways you can use it is you can ask it to give you alternative perspectives, because it has all of your knowledge. It's the Barry AI, but it also has all the knowledge that's ever been put into any AI in the world, because it's all interconnected. And it also has access to newspapers and magazines and blogs and television shows. So at any given time, I think one of the most interesting ways to use AI will be simply this. You're looking at a scene, you're pondering a thing, you're reading, whatever it is, you're coming at it from your perspective, your background, your history, right? Your current emotional state. Maybe you just had a life-changing event. Maybe you had a death in the family that's really brought your emotions to a very specific point, but you still have to get your work done. Okay. So one of the things I think can be really interesting about this is simply at any time be able to ask AI for an alternate perspective. And you can tell it whose perspective you want. You can also tell it, give me a perspective that I think I'm missing at any given time. And because it's your AI, it knows you, it knows your background. Like it knows, okay, I was born in Sri Lanka. I was raised in Europe. Okay, I have not spent much time, for instance, in Australia. I could ask for an Australian perspective on a global issue that I'm wrestling with and researching that I just simply wouldn't have, but it does. So that's, I think, one of the really quick and easy ways that AI can completely change your ability to respond to a given problem, because it can give you alternate perspectives across the board.
Yeah.
That you just simply don't have.
Yeah, that is fascinating. Talking about a more specific sort of drilled down example that touches us all is the medical field. And if we think about how the field operates, obviously you could take any discipline. There's a hive mentality in the medical field. There is knowledge out there that doctors share through papers and research and conferences and books and apps. When somebody now comes in and says, I have these symptoms and tell me my diagnosis, capturing all that and updating that regularly based on new research is something that we will see, and it will help diagnose us better. I've seen research showing where doctors versus computers, basically, versus AI, are shown x-rays with cancerous images, and the doctors get it right 74% of the time. The doctors plus AI, so the AI is recommending something, gets it right 76% of the time. But the AI alone gets it right 90% of the time. So the doctors are looking at images that the AI is telling them is cancer, and the doctor's saying, no, that's not cancer. But the AI is telling them, well, gets it right pretty significantly. So that is a field, and there are other fields like it as well, that allow this knowledge and the massaging of the information, what's in front of me in this patient, what's going on in this patient, maybe through 20 questions. And then every one of those questions provides a little more of a connection to a potential diagnosis. So when we think about the medical field, for example, where will it end up? And how does something like that survive? Because we can think about engineering as another topic. We can think about other elements of science where there's work being done. Nevertheless, that advances the state of knowledge. But when we go to apply the knowledge, will you and me be doctors? Because we just have a doctor AI.
Sure. Well, I think there's a couple things to think about there. One, here's something that I don't see people talking about much. People keep talking about the fact, and I talk about it in my book, there's the human qualities that AI doesn't have. And that these are good qualities: authenticity and vulnerability and curiosity, right? AI is not inherently curious about anything. It just absorbs everything. There's a big difference between absorption and curiosity and diving down a rabbit hole because you want to know versus you're just simply being given all knowledge. So here's what I want to say about that. People talk about how good it is, and I talk about it, but I can also talk about the fact that one of the reasons I believe AI gets 96% is because it doesn't have any emotions. It's not talking to the patient. It's not getting wrapped up in the crying person in front of it. It is pure logic and very specifically observational logic. It looks at x-rays. It compares them to a billion other x-rays. It has no investment in the diagnosis. A doctor does. I mean, unless you have an absolute psychopathic doctor, they care about what they're telling the person in front of them. So they couch their language. They maybe change their head gestures. They might do something like this. And, I got to talk to you about something. Right? The AI has none of that. So in this instance, the lack of human quality is what actually makes the AI more successful at that specific task, diagnostics. So I think it's important that when we look at AI, we acknowledge both the reality of it not being a human and not having these human qualities, but then looking for places where that's actually a positive. And that's a really great example. You can feed it a billion x-rays, a billion MRI scans, and it looks at them impassionately. Therefore, you're going to get the best possible answer from a medical perspective. May not be the best answer from an emotional perspective. May not be what the patient wants to hear, but it's what needs to be said. So that's, I think, a really interesting thing. The other part about that is you asked, will we all become doctors? No, what we all will become is much more adept at addressing our own concerns. And what that will do is release the burden on the medical system if it's employed correctly. And so this becomes a matter of education and regulation and all the things that go along with that. But will we become our own doctors? No. Will we only go to the doctor when we really need to? That's my hope. AI becomes the filter for the medical community. And that's in everything, engineering, all of it, right? Look, an AI may not look at a river and go, let's build a bridge here. It may just look at the river and go, well, that river has X amount of water and it's traveling at such a velocity. Da, 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 da. But a human looks at it and goes, if I build a bridge here, then I can build a village on the other side of the river and that village can grow and we can conceptualize. The AI right now can't. Will that change in the future? Artificial general intelligence, AGI, superintelligence, hyperintelligence? Maybe. I mean, some of the stuff I've read about the human brain, our best understanding of it, it's essentially a biological quantum computer. Our synapses fire, they fire at such unbelievable speeds, and there's so much processing going on that we actually don't understand why it's not running at 1,000,000 degrees. There's some very intricate thing happening here that we have no idea how to replicate.
So to sort of wrap it up, how do leaders incorporate AI into their day-to-day? What are some action items that we need to do so we make sure we're either on the cutting edge or behind the bleeding edge and using AI to our benefit in whatever industry we might be in?
Well, I think the first thing is to approach it very, very dismissive of its creativity. Understand that it's an augmentation tool, not another person. And then look at ways you can train AI to specifically augment the things that you need augmentation on or your team. One of the most interesting things I see happening with AI is when people take an AI or an LLM and they fine tune it into a very, very niche area, like protein folding. Some of the research that's happening and developing is because we've taken an AI and we've literally stripped most of its knowledge out, but we've given it an incredible amount of knowledge about DNA and proteins and how they fold and what can happen. And we're now using those to conceptualize new approaches to cancer treatments and other things. The AI, again, doesn't care. It has no vested interest in publishing a paper. It has no ego associated with its own research. So if you as a human being, as a leader, want to step forward and take advantage of AI, that's the way to think about it. Think about it in terms of, all right, well, I'm a human. I have an ego. I want people to listen to me. Okay, how can I inform my own discourse by augmenting my knowledge to a point where what I say becomes more powerful, more engaging, more interesting? AI can be that tool for you. I think of AI as it's my research assistant. It's my bounce wall, right? Anytime I come up with a new idea, I give it to ChatGPT and I say, hammer this idea, pick at it, ask me questions about it, make me prove the validity of this idea. I love doing that with ChatGPT because, again, it has no emotion. It's not trying to build me up. It's not trying to knock me down. So I can use it as a hypercritical feedback theory system to address my own ideas. And that then helps me construct a version of it that I want to present to the public. Yeah. And I think all leaders can do the same thing as they use that tool to augment what they're going to present to their team. Make it part of your team building exercise. That don't just have your Monday morning stand up. On Friday, tell your AI what your stand up's going to be about, and then ask it to hypercritically take it apart. And then your stand up will be better.
I love the idea of using AI as an augmentation tool, and that way, whatever it is that you're doing, look for ways to help to make it better. And we might not be advancing the AI, and that's for the AI creators, that's for the computer world. But as somebody who can take advantage of an app that can help me, I need to look for ways that I can make my product better. And I hadn't thought about using AI as a critic, which is extremely valuable, thinking about my detractors or somebody, sort of on the other side, what they're thinking about. Nevertheless, there's just using AI as an augmentation tool and then being super creative and, sort of like pushing the envelope on what we can ask AI to do, and therefore making your projects, your output better because you're looking at your situation or whatever it is you're trying to do from different angles that you don't have access to yesterday without AI.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think I'll tell you where that comes from for me is what I did in the White House. I was getting a religious studies degree. So one of the things I did in the Office of Communications was read what was going to be said by the President of the United States and try to think about it in the context of how would somebody from a very different belief system interpret what's being said. And that led a little bit into some work that I did in cross-cultural business communications. British Petroleum went into the Middle East for the very first time many years ago. They built an office building. They painted it the British Petroleum green. It was firebombed the next day. Why? We're here to build jobs. Well, because you painted it green, the holy color of Allah. An AI wouldn't have made that mistake, but a human does, right? So that's the kind of thing where you can take AI and say, here's my project. Here's my idea. Here's everything that I'm going to do. Now criticize it. Break it apart. Tell me what's wrong with this. And give it the idea of
together and make it right.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's one of the most valuable tools. And hardly anybody uses it that way.
Well, so the book is called Leadership in the AI Era?
It's called The Human Algorithm, Creative Leadership for the AI Workplace.
Oh, awesome. Okay. And out in October.
Yep.
I'm fascinated by it. I want to read it. And thank you for coming on the podcast and telling us all about it.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me on.
Wrapping up, what's the one thing you can implement today? There are a lot of great ideas in this episode, but I think the most important action you can take is to use AI as a partner. I'm a big fan of AI. While you cannot rely on it solely, you can use it to help you become smarter and to brainstorm. Get experience with AI. Use it like an assistant, an editor, or a research tool. And of course, While it's not a replacement for human judgment, there's so much more it can do. If you're already using AI, try some new features. Push the envelope and keep learning. You'll never know where your next great idea will come from. Thank you for listening. And congratulations, you're a member of the End of the Show Club. If you have a question or want to get in touch, you can send me a note. The address is leadershipcareeraccelerator@gmail.com. And check out and engage with me on Substack at Leadership Career Accelerator.